Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I'm David Jones. I normally do this every Friday at 2:30 UK time. If you haven't seen these before, we have a quick look at some of the major events to watch out for next week. It's a bit of a quieter week next week on the economic calendar. Then I'll have a look at the major markets, so stock market indices, a couple of currencies, oil, gold, silver, Bitcoin. Then if there's any questions or any stuff you want looking at, if you put it in the chat, we'll take a look at it. It's been a good week this week for me. The big, I mean, I went short the DAX yesterday. I came out of it just this morning, but I went short yesterday. The other big winner for the week is heating oil. So that was a pretty logical trade for me to do whenever I did it. Can't remember. I think it was here, Wednesday, because that trend has been up. So there's been some interesting moves this week. I'm still long the dollar index and still long crude oil. So we'll talk about those as well as we go through. But some interesting moves. I mean, some of the big stuff, NASDAQ and S&P have been interesting. We'll take a look at those in a bit more detail. You know, I would, in the short term, I'd still be looking to sell short on these, even though the big trend is up. But let's come to all of that in a second. So let's get started. Let's just do a risk warning for the sake of good order. So this presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, let's have a look. So a bit of a quieter week next week, but on Wednesday, US inflation. I mean, clearly inflation is still a big theme for markets, not as big as it was 6 months ago. But let's see what the US inflation looks like next week. That's probably the biggest event for next week, I think, on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we have the European interest rate decision from the ECB, the European Central Bank. And then we have US PPI, Producer Price Index, in the afternoon as well. So Wednesday, Thursday, with Wednesday, the US inflation data, probably the big one, I think, for next week. Let's see. A quick word from me about some of the other stuff I do. I run a trading course. I've run it for about more than 2 years now. There are two parts to the course: medium-term trading, holding trades for weeks and months. For example, using that approach, I've still got a dollar yen trade that I've been in since about March. So longer term trades on that approach. There's 11 video lessons on that. Short-term trading over hours and days, the stuff I do sort of day to day during the week. There are 7 video lessons on that. As part of the course, you get 6 live webinars with me. We did the last one, the most recent one, last night. So they're held every month and you get access to the recordings. And there's a WhatsApp group that runs as well that I put updates in during the day, what I'm looking to trade, stuff on markets, answer any questions. I did this open trading period from November to January last year. If you go back through the YouTube channel, you can see the updates. £4,000 account and realised profits of just under £2,200 over that period. Better than I expected, and I have to say, past performance is no guarantee of future performance. But you know, I think that the way to demonstrate that you know what you're doing is to actually show what you're doing. And I think so many trading courses out there don't. I think they sell a dream that's unrealistic. So for me, if you've watched any of the stuff I've done, you know I'm always fairly open about the realities of trading and how I trade. I did the same thing again from May to July this year. £5,000 account this time round. Realised profits by the end of July of £3,116. Again, this was better than I expected it to be. You know, I think in this business, if after a year you're profitable, you're doing so much better than anybody else. So if you're going to go into trading and you've never done it before, or you've got limited experience, you know, don't expect to be making crazy percentage returns. You know, we know that most people lose. Just try and be in a position where you're profitable after a year. And that's a big thing of what I try and do in the courses. You know, don't worry about making enough money next week to go and buy yourself a Lamborghini. Just worry about staying in the game and trading correctly. This WhatsApp group has proved popular. It used to be just for people who'd been on the course. I've opened it up to everybody over the last few months. I do a daily update, at least once a day. I do an update. First of all, in the morning, what am I looking at? What trades have I got going on? Where are my stops? All that sort of stuff. Markets I'm watching, trades I'm running. Q&A, if there's any questions throughout the day. I see someone's just popped a question in about platinum, so I'll answer that once I finish this. If you'd like to try it for a month, it's 50 quid a month. If you use the code YouTube, you get a 20% discount off the first month. So if you're serious about trading, and if you think I know what I'm talking about, then you should do it. Is the long and short of that one. So you should, if you go to the website, hang on, where is it? Go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. The link, as usual, is in the description. Go to subscribe there, and you can join the WhatsApp group. If you click on courses, you can see all the course details. Click on performance, you can see a breakdown of that trading performance from November to January with all the trades in there, all the winners and the losers in there. So there's a whole load of information. But like I say, if you want to try out the WhatsApp group, you can do it with a 20% discount for the first month. And that's a sample screenshot of what it looks like. So there you go. And you get updates. You know, all the trades I've done this week, I flagged them up in the group before I've done them. You know, it's not a trading tip thing, but it is what I'm looking at and what I think is interesting on the day. 5-star Trustpilot reviews. There's a newsletter I send out every week. That's free. Go to the website on the homepage. There's a box there for you to sign up for the newsletter, and I sent that out normally over the weekend. Okay, that's it. Let's have a look at these markets. Let's start off with US stock markets. I am waiting to buy the dip because the trend is still up. So for me, the big trend is still up. We've had a bit of volatility over the last month or so, but it doesn't change the big trend. This is the NASDAQ. So I'd like to buy the dip in the NASDAQ. So, you know, that's it. That's the trade. That's the medium-term trade. So for me, as long as it stays above about 14.2, the trend is still up. So that's it. Over the last few days, we have seen this market weakening. I think it'd be interesting this afternoon what happens. Obviously, markets have just opened. I could be quite tempted to sell short this afternoon if this strength runs out of steam. So in the short term, I could be looking to be a seller. The closest I would put my stop, I'd probably want it up here somewhere, about 15.5. So it'd be quite handy if the market pushes a bit higher and then stalls. Let's see what happens. But the daily view has not changed for me. You know, if you've watched these throughout the year, we've been in this trend all this year. That hasn't changed. S&P 500, same. You know, we've been in a trend for the S&P since October last year. So we're 11 months into that. Lots of support down at 43.30, 43.25 from June. Again, a bit of a weak week so far. I probably, if I was in a trade, I might do a trade on these US indices this afternoon. I would look to sell short. Personally, at the moment, I think these markets are still under a bit of pressure. Let's see. Let's see what happens this afternoon. The DAX, I was short the DAX this week. I thought it was a really logical short because the trend in the DAX had been down. There we go, look at that. And it blipped up yesterday. That's yesterday's trading on the hourlies. I went short and it just sort of tanked this morning. So I trailed the stop down and I've come out of that. I'd still sell it short though, I think. If it pushed a bit higher from here, it looks an interesting short. On the dailies, it's been a bit boring. It's been pretty boring since April, the DAX, hasn't it? We broke out to these highs for the year and haven't really managed to do much since then. So a bit of a strange one, the DAX, over the last 4 or 5 months. You know, there is support ahead of 15,450. You know, today it's been as low as 15,575. Oh, what's happened there? So maybe we'll see it bounce back, but I'm a bit non-committal on the DAX in the medium term. because it is so sideways. FTSE is pretty sideways as well this year. There's the FTSE this year. I mean, it is just sideways. It's just not my sort of market. You know, there was an opportunity mid-August when it came back to the lows for the year, and we saw this market bounce, but it's just a little bit boring. Japan, I did a trade on this last night actually, on the hourlies. It's a bit against me at the moment, but I did buy it last night. Let's get rid of some of these things. So it fell out of the trend line yesterday, but it did very briefly on Thursday make a new high for that trend in the hourly time frame. So I did buy it. I've got a stop at 32,300. Let's see how it works out. If we go back to the dailies though, again like the DAX, it's a little bit boring in that time frame at the moment. And I suppose you could argue that we do have a downtrend on the Nikkei. There we go, something like that. You know, so there's an argument for being short the Nikkei. If you went short now, I'd put a stop loss above that August high, which is 33,500. So there's maybe an argument for that. And then someone could argue, well, actually, the trend since January is up. You know, as usual in markets, there is never a black or white answer as to whether you be a buyer or a seller. So I don't know, but I quite fancied that short-term trade yesterday on the Nikkei. So stock markets, bit mixed. Interesting afternoon, I think, for US markets. I'll be watching those this afternoon to see if it runs out of steam and there's a short opportunity. Let's see what happens. Let's take a look at some of the other stuff. Dollar index. So I am long the dollar index. I've been long the dollar index since, hold on, where was it? In here somewhere, I think. Was it in here? In here. Nearly got stopped out on that move there, and bang, bang, bang. This is where we are now. It has been strong, this dollar index. If we go back to the dailies, it was a big break this week, you know, through the May highs. I'd buy the dip, I think, in the more medium term view. I'd buy the dip in the dollar index. And so the question is, how far does the dip go? But I think that's interesting if it does start to sell off. We do have a bit of bearish divergence for fans of the squiggles. We've got 10-day RSI here. The market's moved up, hit a level, sold off, moved a bit higher. The RSI is making lower highs. So that is bearish divergence. So it's a suggestion, or can be a suggestion, that the strength is running out of steam. Let's see how that works out. But I'm long in the hourly time frame. I've got to stop about here somewhere, I think. So that's been a good trade. Let's see what happens with that one. In other currencies, what else is interesting? Well, because we're seeing this dollar strength, you know, I was wondering if we would get a bounce for the euro this week. We haven't had it yet, but euro against the US dollar, you know, the trend since last September had been up. So for me, the trend in the euro was like that. Are we going to see a euro turnaround next week? We're back to these, what had been big levels from the end of May, 106.35 and then 105 from March. I do wonder. So I would be betting on something of a euro recovery, but it's not happening yet. So I'm still quite patient on that. I did wonder if we were going to get a bounce this week, but because the dollar has been strong, then obviously the euro's been weak. Same thing with pound against the dollar. There we go. So if I change the colours on that to make it a bit clearer, you know, pound against the dollar, we'd had this trend since whenever that was, October last year. And this is where we are. We've fallen out of the trend. We do have big support coming in at there, 123. So only a couple of 100 points below where we are now. So I think it's interesting. So for me, these aren't markets that I'm trading at the moment, but they're more interesting to watch to see what happens if we do get a bit of strength coming back in ahead of, you know, what had been fairly important lows. Let's see where it goes. Oh, and pound against the Aussie, that's a good trade. I did that trade this week. I'm short pound against the Aussie dollar. So I went short. We had this big move on Tuesday in response, I think, to the Australian interest rate decision. But until then, you know, the market had just been edging lower, edging lower, edging lower. So I went short on Tuesday, and I'm still short. I could do with it breaking below these old lows. But let's see what happens. So currencies at the moment, it's the dollar. The story is the dollar strength. It was only yesterday we had the highest level for the US dollar index since about March this year. So 6-month highs. I'll be buying the dip on the US dollar still at the moment. Let's see how that all works out. Which also links into gold. I did wonder, I put it in the WhatsApp group this morning, is there a little buy opportunity stacking up on gold? I mean, if we look, let's start from scratch here. If we took the trend from these highs above 2000 and whatever it was, you could argue, okay, that is down still, I would say. We do have good support, not big support, but good support down here. But I wondered on the hourlies, we'd had the run up, the market sold off. We have got, from a short-term point of view, good support there at 19.14. So I could be tempted to be a buyer of gold. Of course, it means the US dollar's got to weaken though, really. So let's see what happens. But I think it's an interesting market to watch next week. So for me, this is definitely one of the markets to watch next week, and a market where there might be a trade, depending how it all finishes today. Again, it's been pretty weak this week because of that US dollar strength. We've seen a weaker gold price. Let's see what next week brings. But I'm wondering if this whole 1900 to 1914 level will hold. Silver, still weak, but the trend is up. We go back to August 2022, September 2022. So we're a year into this trend, and this level, this sort of 22 area, $22, has done a good job of holding the market, holding any declines since June of this year. So it's another interesting one for next week. If we saw it edge a bit lower, do we see the buyers come back in for silver? Let's see. That's another one, I think, for me to keep an eye on next week. Crude oil. So I'm long crude oil. I've been long oil for a while. I've been long oil since where? I think since about here, the middle of August. Nearly got stopped out down here. So that's been a really good trade. There was the surge this week on Tuesday on news that what was it? Russia and Saudi Arabia were going to stick to their production cuts. So we sort of surge higher. I've got a stop loss, a trailing stop at about 86 on my trade. Let's see what happens. But this is another one, a bit like the US dollar, where we had a breakout over the last week or so. We've got oil at highs for the year. You can see some of the news stories are picking up on increased prices at the pump, which isn't surprising. We've had a 25% run in the price of oil since the end of June. It's a big old move. So I'd be buy the dips on oil. It is, pretty overbought up here now. Let's see what happens. But I'd absolutely buy the dip on oil. And for me, it's interesting, if it gets knocked back to the mid 80s or somewhere like that. There's that trend in oil since the end of June. So I'd still be bullish on oil. Still happy to be a buyer. Let's see what happens. And heating oil is the trade I'm in at the moment. Did a trade on it the other week, had the stop in the wrong place, got stopped out. Shouldn't have got stopped out. So I did the trade again this week. And that's it really. Trend is up for me on heating oil. If it drops much below, I don't know, 310, I'd probably change my mind. But let's see. And the other one, natural gas, the old favourite. I mean, natural gas has been a bit of a boring market. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. It's been pretty sideways. It can't break through 3, natural gas. So we've been this broad sideways range for 6 months now. But I thought this week was interesting because it's been knocked again to the bottom of the recent range. So the recent range is about 240, 242, and we've seen it there. I haven't traded it because it's not trending enough. It's just in this sideways range. But it's interesting, that it's been come back down to those. There you go. You can see those old lows there, and how many times that level has held for natural gas. Going back to a couple of months now. So it's an interesting one, but not one so much for me to trade. And finally, Bitcoin. I'm still positive on Bitcoin. It's pretty boring, to be honest. But that 24,750 level continues to hold the price up. Okay, it's sort of fallen out of this trend line. It's all a bit rubbish, isn't it? Because it's a stupid cryptocurrency. But, 24/7 is the level in Bitcoin. So, yeah, that's that. Let's have a look at some commodities, actually. What's been interesting this week? What did I pick up on? I mentioned coffee this morning, didn't I? Coffee Robusta. I thought that was interesting. Coffee from Jan this year. Again, it's been a bit dull throughout the summer, but the trend is still just about up. So that's maybe an interesting market if we're going to see the thing rally from here. Cocoa, I think a few people in the WhatsApp group have been in the cocoa trade. I mean, it's a great trend in cocoa, going all the way back to last year, broke out recently, sort of having a bit of a faff around, trying to decide if it's going to break out. And the final one, wheat. I've been short wheat for what feels like a long time. It's probably only a few months. It's interesting down here, wheat. This is the chart of the wheat price. Clearly, we had this massive move in March 22 because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But since then, the price has more than halved. And I just wonder, is this going to be a base for wheat? It keeps coming back to it and not breaking it. If that level breaks, I'm still short, so I do want the level to break. I wonder if we could see a much deeper sell-off in wheat. But for those of you who want to look at stuff that isn't the usual financial markets, I think that's an interesting one to watch next week to see what happens down there. So yeah. So for me, going into next week, what's interesting, as usual, stock markets. Like I say, I'd be tempted to be a seller of strength this afternoon if these things run out of steam. Let's see what happens. Dollar index, because it has been so strong, it'd be nice to get a bit of pullback and see what happens there. Oil, because again, we've broken out. It'd be nice to get a pullback and see where the buyers come back in. And gold, I think, is the other interesting one for next week because it's showing signs of perhaps stabilising ahead of this old support. So a bit of a mix of markets. I've done quite a few trades this week. I did get stopped out of copper. So that's been the one loser for the week. I got stopped out of copper, which looks to be the right decision based on what's happened since then in copper. But otherwise, it's been a good week for me. So let's see where we are next week. So we'll have a look at your stuff now. But don't forget, if you want to try out the WhatsApp group, you should do it. It's like this, but every day. Can you imagine it? For less than the price of a cup of coffee. Access to me around the clock. So if you go to the website, it's all in the thingy in the description. Put in the code YouTube, you get 20% discount off the first month. Right, let's take a look at the stuff you want looking at. I think it's interesting. I do quite fancy shorting these US stocks this afternoon. Let's see how it goes. Right, let's have a look. Dollar yen. So dollar yen analysis someone's asked for. So I am long dollar yen at the moment since February or March, whenever it was. I mean, the big trend is still up. I mean, going back to 2021 on the dollar against the Japanese yen, that big trend is still up. It's broken out through the highs. So that's positive. So again, I would be buy the dip on the dollar against the Japanese yen. I wouldn't buy today, but I would be looking to buy the dip. The only question is, where does your stop go? The most aggressive place, if I was a buyer now, I would put a stop, is 144. I'd probably go down at 141 from a more medium-term point of view. On the hourlies, it's again maybe an interesting one to watch next week. There's that 144 spike low. So it's bullish, isn't it? Well, it's bullish for me anyway, because the trend is up, and only yesterday it moved to a new high for that trend. So by definition, the trend is strong. So for me, I'd be a buyer of the dips. I'd just rather see a deeper dip on the dollar yen and be a buyer. So that's pretty straightforward for me on dollar yen. Aussie dollar getting smoked. Let's have a look at that. Is it? It's not that dramatic, is it? It got knocked a bit this morning. It's been knocked back to yesterday's lows. I mean, it's a bit on the dailies. It's broken some big levels, isn't it? It's broken the big support. I could be tempted, because we haven't had that much follow through, have we? So it's broken a big level. The contrarian in me here could take the view that it's overshot to the downside. So an aggressive trade here. Oh, should we do it? Should we do a complete counter trend trade? Because we've seen the Aussie all a bit sideways. Breaks the old support. Don't really get much follow through. And it's sort of holding. So I could take the view, well, maybe this is a false break. So what's the lowest it's been? 63.64. What was the lowest? 63.57. So I'm going to be a buyer. 63.64. Let me do the maths in my head. Hold on a sec. I'm going to come up with my magic stop loss. Let's go 63. Make it easy for me. We'll go 63 for a stop on that. FX. What do I want to do? Aussie dollar. Oh, it's there. Perfect. What am I going to do? What else am I going to do? Buy it. So we're going to buy. We're going to put a stop at 63. I'll explain more about the reasoning behind this in a minute. And we'll risk however much. We'll risk $100. There we go. Do 10,000. Blah, 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 blah. I've got enough margin, haven't I? Yeah, I've got loads of margin. Oh, let's do 100, just do 150 risk. There we go, 140 risk. Okay, bang, bang, bang. So my buyer at 93. Okay, let's place that trade. Let's see how that works out. So what I was thinking with that, it's quite interesting that it's broken what is a big level, but we've not had any follow through. So it can be a suggestion. Perhaps it's over. Perhaps the move's been overdone, and it's going to pull back into the range. Let's see. We've got the trade on now anyway. So we'll see how that works out. There's the trade, Aussie dollar. Where is it? There, in there. Aussie dollar. There's a few other trades in there from the. This is real money. This is my money that I use for the live streams, the YouTube stuff. We've got a few other trades in there from previous live streams. Let's see how that works out. But yeah, it's an interesting one, that the old Aussie. September is usually in red. Do you think that trend will continue? I have absolutely no opinion on that, and I don't really care, to be honest. You know, I just sort of. I'm sure you're right that September is traditionally, I think it is a bad month for the stock market. The same way we get the Santa rallies more often than not in the run up to Christmas. But I don't let that affect my trading. I try and trade what is in front of me rather than looking at what's September like normally. Cocoa and sugar at several year highs due to supply issues. This of course feeds into food inflation. Yes, it does, doesn't it? And also the high oil price as well. You know, we've got this oil price up where it is. So you've got high food prices, high oil prices. Will we see a spike higher in inflation just when everyone thinks it's getting to be under control? Who knows? Wheat. So look at wheat. Oof. Big down move in the last hour. Let's have a look at that. Oh, that's the one we just looked at. Of course, I keep forgetting I'm in this trade. Yeah, I talked about that, didn't I? There's that big level to watch, whatever that level is, 565. If that breaks, it might sell off a bit more. Palladium, I did mention this on the WhatsApp group this week because I think it's interesting. No, it was platinum I mentioned, not palladium. Palladium, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, it's really hugging those recent lows, isn't it? And it almost feels like it wants to go below 1200. So I think 1200 is the level. If it breaks 1200, it looks like that trend that's been in place since 3400 is still going, isn't it? DAL stock, Delta Airlines. Let's have a look at those on the dailies. So that looks a bit boring to me because I would say if we look at that, the last 18 months, it's all a bit sideways, isn't it? But if you looked at it since October last year, you could absolutely make the case the trend is up. Yeah, so you want to be a buyer of the dip. So what would you do? I wouldn't buy yet. I'd still be waiting. Yeah, the ideal situation is it sells off down to 36, down towards the trend line, and there's a buying opportunity there. I've just seen somebody's joined the WhatsApp group, so well done. If you're on the if you're on this live stream, thanks for that. I'll add you once we're done. I would rather wait for a dip. If I'm buying here, you know, my first thing I think about, whether it's a medium-term trade or a short-term trade, where is my stop going to go? And here, my stop needs to be down at 34. And for me, that's a bit too far away from where it is at the moment. So let's see. So yeah, I'd buy the dip, but I would be, with Delta, I'd be sitting on my hands a bit with this one. And I do trade stocks, you know, I don't talk about them much on here. I mention them now and again in the WhatsApp group, I'm just bringing up so I can see what stock trades I've got running. Actually, I've got them in this list here, haven't I? Here we go. The stock trade I've had running the longest is Google. So I've been in Google since 13th of June, and it went against me for a month. So, but that's done okay. That's been the biggest winner so far, and I try and do a mix of longs and shorts. The next biggest winner I've got since the 15th of June is Cognizant Technology Solutions. So I've been in that as well. So I do just look, again, just look for trends and just try and run them for as long as the trend continues. Very low maintenance. I'd probably check it once a day, if that. Feeder cattle and live cattle. I'm in the live cattle. I was in the live cattle trade. It was a good trade, that. I haven't got back into it since, though. So where is it? Cattle, live cattle. Trend is up, isn't it? Look at that trend. What a lovely trend. So there you go. I would buy the dips or I'd buy the breakout. So it's a bit of a wait and see for me. If it dipped down towards 170, it looks like a good trade. If it breaks out through 185-ish, it's a good trade. So it's a bit of a wait and see. So yeah, I can't give you advice on your NASDAQ trades. You need to decide. Don't put the trade on and not have a clue what you're doing with it. You should decide when you put the trade on, where do I expect it to go? I can't give you any tips on that, but good luck with them anyway. I'd use a guaranteed stop with the Japanese yen as near levels where the Bank of Japan might intervene. Fair enough. Let's see, where is that yen now? And that's it really. If there are no more questions, I think we're done, aren't we? So like I say, it feels like a bit of a quiet end to the week for me. But I did copper, sterling Aussie, heating oil, short DAX. So I've done 4 trades this week, which for me is about average, to be honest. About 1 a day or slightly less than 1 a day. There might be another trade this afternoon. Probably the S&P is maybe the better short for me this afternoon. Otherwise, it's just a case of waiting to see what happens next week. It'd be great if this dollar index sold off a bit. So there's another opportunity to buy in. It'd be great if oil sold off a bit. Even though I'm still in both those trades, it'd be great to see that. Gold, I think, is really interesting. Gold's had a bit of a move. Gold's really interesting for next week, for the bottom fishers out there. Are we seeing a base building for gold? So there's a few bits and pieces in there to keep an eye on. So maybe one more trade for me at the end of the week on one of these US indices. But that's it otherwise. So we'll wrap things up there. I did do a video on oil in the week. So if you missed that, I've started doing at least one video a week on an interesting market. So I did oil earlier in the week. So I'm going to try and do another interesting market next week. It might be gold, actually, if it carries on like it is. But like I say, to find out more about the courses I do and the WhatsApp group and all that stuff, go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. You can contact me via the website as well. Otherwise, that's it, isn't it? It's far too hot in the UK, isn't it, to be sitting around inside talking about markets. So we'll wrap things up there. Any questions, let me know. Otherwise, see you same time, same place next week. And until then, good luck with your trading.